You should be good to go.
Thank you. Okay, this meeting is in order. This is the December 13th, 2021 meeting of the Ridgefield Board of Education. Everyone can take themselves off mute to join in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. As soon as we see the flag. Pledge allegiance to
the flag
of the
of the
United States,
States of America,
to the republic
and to the republic
for which it
which it
stands,
stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
with
liberty
and
justice
justice
for all.
Thank you all. I will be brief as this is the last meeting of the year. I'm sure that everybody has a lot of things going on, getting ready for the holidays. Couple of items though, there is going to be no budget or policy committee meetings this month. They will resume in January. The board retreat will also be in January. We will have out dates later this week for everyone. And in anticipation of that, we will be sending out orientation materials, not just to the new board members, but to all the board members as kind of a refresher before we go into that board retreat. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. De Silva.
Thank you, Jonathan. Good evening, everyone. I too just have a couple of announcements. First, I just wanted to let folks know that we do have a district calendar with all of the events. We're trying our best to keep that updated. So for those of you that are looking forward to seeing what's happening in our schools, I would encourage you to go onto the district website, look at events, you'll see the calendars there, and one that includes all of the district events. This week, we actually have our RHS concert, and certainly Jake can share more about that, but it is a special event with the wind ensemble, the concert choir, the concert orchestra, and symphonic orchestra. I know that it'll be a lot of fun to watch and a joy to watch, so that is on the 15th. I did send out a letter this past week about some of the events that are really just recognizing the national events that were happening, local events happening with respect to threats. And what I would say, threats in our schools, and also just acknowledging and reminding families the supports that are available, not only for our children within our school, but also for families. I just wanted to take a moment for those that don't perhaps get my memo, but do have the opportunity to watch this meeting, just to remind everyone what is available in our schools. Our schools are truly the heart of a community, and I don't want anyone to go without resources when we have them. For families, of course, there's 211. There's Kids in Crisis. We have mobile crisis services. Our town has social services. Tony Phillips is the social worker for the town. He's always available. So if families feel like that they need more than what's available in the schools, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We will find the resources for you, or at least connect you, give you some through line to that resource. Certainly the Department of Children and Families also has resources, so families can directly reach out to them. On the kids side, many of those folks are on this call. We have our school-based administrators, school counselors, we have our psychologists, we have our nurses, we have crisis teams. Those are groups of people that come together to navigate issues. So again, families can reach out to us directly and say, hey, I think my child needs some help. What's available to them? We have the resources in the schools. That's why they're there. I just can't emphasize enough with what we're noticing. And it matters to us that folks reach out. That's why we're here. So please, if you're out there listening, do not hesitate to pick up the phone and call your school principal and say, hey, I need some help here. Can you direct me in the right direction? And again, that's why we're here. So hopefully that message gets out to the folks that don't have the opportunity to read our Friday newsletter. But I know I speak on behalf of all of our principals that we want to help whatever way we can. It starts off with threats, but there's lots of other variables that are happening around our schools in Connecticut, in the nation. Our schools need to be available to you and are available to you. So please don't hesitate. With that, this is the last board meeting of the year. And so we really want to wish everybody a happy holiday. Some of you are already in your holiday. Again, have a wonderful, healthy, happy enjoyable, peaceful, quiet, without technology season. It feels like it's going to be a long time, and we will see you after the new year. So cheers.
Cheers and thank you. Moving on to committee chairs and liaison appointments. We do have a new year and a new slate of committees coming up for this year. We've got for Budget, Finance, and Operations Committee, we have Ken Schoberg as chair, being joined by Liz Flogel, Sean McAvoy, and Tom Collin. For Curriculum, we have Tina Malhotra as chair, being joined by Rachel Ruggieri, Amy Casey, and Sean McAvoy. For Policy, we have Rachel Ruggieri chairing, being joined by Ken Schoberg, Tom Collin, and Selena Bell. And for Strategic Planning, we have Tina Malhotra as chair, being joined by Ken Schoberg, Selena Bell, and myself. For Negotiations, should there be any this year, we have me as chair, Tina Malhotra, and Rachel Ruggieri. For Liaison Appointments, as liaison to the PTA, we have Amy Casey. To CES, we have Tina Malhotra. Our athletic liaison is going to be Tom Collin. Our liaison to the Ridgefield Education Foundation will be Selena Bell. Our legislative liaison will be Liz Flogel. Our CABE liaison will be Tina Malhotra. Our prevention liaison will be Sean McAvoy. And our CASA liaison will be Tina Malhotra. We do have a few other liaison appointments that we'll be announcing in January. And that's that. Moving on to representatives, starting with our RHS student representative. I do see Ansh on the line.
Hey, good evening, everybody. It's my pleasure to be with you all this evening. I hope you're all having a great month so far. I'm crossing my fingers for some snow this week. I feel like the weather's been so weird and wonky lately, but we're hoping on that. Anyways, what's going on with RHS? Obviously, with masks, I can't see students' faces and their mouths, but judging based off like their chatty tendencies and positive physical demeanors, students are walking around the halls with large smiles on their faces, which is great. I think that the holiday season gets everyone excited, including me. There's a real sense of camaraderie in and out of the school right now. For example, I know the holiday stroll went amazing for so many clubs and organizations at RHS. Student government alone, in fact, made over $1,000 from their big good stand. So go them. On another note, we also recently started a new tradition at the high school. We call it door decorating. I guess we're working on the name, but this used to happen at Branchville, my old elementary school, where students covered their teachers' doors with fun and festive holiday decorations, such as snowmen and such. So when Ms. DiGiulio, the student government advisor, and I proposed this idea to the teachers, we were delightfully overwhelmed with excitement and requests to have their doors decorated. With such a demand and only enough volunteers to decorate about 30 doors, we were able to recruit some members of the National Honor Society. So again, some of that camaraderie coming back in. And we successfully decorated over 40 of the teachers' doors at RHS with beautiful winter spirit. The feedback we received from students and teachers was really heartwarming. So, I love that. Looking forward, we're also planning for a winter spirit week before the break, as well as some new ideas to help students alleviate some of their stress for midterms coming up in January. I'm very much looking forward to our Cocoa and Cram Day, which is meant for underclassmen to come to school later in the day after hours and enjoy some hot cocoa while asking whatever questions about midterms they may have to the upperclassmen, and it should be a great time for everyone. Finally, with fall sports coming to an end, we're all shifting gears towards winter sports. I don't mean to toot my own horn, but my house basketball team did just come off of a thrilling 2-point victory last Saturday. So, everyone's stoked for that. As well as that, hockey and basketball games are starting up. So everyone's ready to start showing up and supporting Ridgefield at these games. But yeah, that's all I have for you guys tonight. So thanks for listening.
Thanks, Ansh. Next up, we have our NEAR representative, and I'm not seeing you.
I'm here.
Oh, there you are.
As long as you can hear me.
Yep, I see you now.
Okay. Good evening to our new members, board members. I am Dr. Robin Collins. I am the president of our local teacher union, NEAR. I realize that this is not the first meeting for our new board members, but I would like to officially extend a welcome to Selena, Amy, and Tom on behalf of our membership. at NEAR. I can't even say it, Jonathan. We appreciate so much the commitment you have made to our school community by filling this role, and we recognize the countless hours that you have taken on. And we are very, very grateful for a strong collaborative relationship with our administration and our Board of Ed, and we definitely look forward to continuing in that partnership. At board meetings thus far this school year, we have spoken of the challenges of bringing our students and schools back to a familiar pre-pandemic situation. We have spoken of the dedication demonstrated by all to support our students academically, socially, and emotionally. We are daily learning the impact of the last couple of years on our students. We're responding to those needs and continually adapting instruction to changing quarantine teaching needs. Our members have demonstrated tenacity, resilience, and dedication. That's the mantra for the year, I think. Tonight, however, I do really have to honestly say that we teachers are weary. The district administrators have been very responsive in adopting new initiatives that will allow teachers to space that we need to respond to students' needs. And even some building administrators have recognized the preciousness of the gift of time. Even then, with that great partnership, NEAR leadership has become increasingly concerned about the effects of a stressful professional context on the emotional, mental, and social well-being of our teachers. We know that high stress situations have negative impacts on any individual's physical health, emotional health, and mental health. This is true for our teachers as it is for our students. As the saying goes, there's no water to tap when the well has gone dry. Right now, we're seeing an increasing number of signs among our membership that indicate the well is running low. We're particularly mindful of the strain the current working conditions have put on our members who provide, particularly those who provide special services to our most vulnerable students, psychologists, counselors, special education teachers, interventionists, etc. These are the folks who are most keenly feeling the impact of the needs of the students that they're seeing in their care. So NEAR is committed to ensuring that all of our members are in the best possible condition, not only so that they're able to support students, but also maintain their own personal lives and family. So to that end, in the coming months of the new year, we will be partnering with CEA around initiatives designed to support teachers' social, emotional well-being and mental health. We hope to continue a strong collaboration with the district administration to ensure our schools have the staffing and the resources required to meet the needs of all of our students, particularly our most vulnerable students. We invite the district administration and the Board of Ed to also join us in future efforts to ensure that everyone in our school community are healthy and vibrant. We look forward to a brand new year. We wish everyone a restful and a peaceful holiday season. Thank you.
Thank you, well said. Next up is our PTA representative. Are you on the line?
Yes, good
Hi.
evening. My name is Lynn Everdell. I'm co-president of the Joint Council of PTAs with Kim Carone. And thank you for the time to speak to you tonight. Our fabulous PTA presidents have shared some highlights and things with which they would like to make you aware. At VP, they recently ran a holiday coin drive and raised over $800 from loose change donations. Well done. And they will be presenting that money to the Ridgefield Food Pantry this week. They did a give thanks program, and the PTA had custom spiritware t-shirts made and gifted those to every staff and faculty member to thank them during this holiday season. They were lucky enough to hold a winter enrichment program that will be starting in the new year, and it will feature before and after school programs in person. Very exciting. And they kicked off with their VP PTA sponsored variety show auditions this week, and they will participate in the invention convention that will also be kicking off. So lots going on there. Barlow Mountain Elementary School, they recently sponsored a coffee talk with Principal Laus. Parents were invited to an informal coffee and question chat. They got a successful scholastic book fair underway for the pre-K through 5th grade. They created a diversity and compassion committee. So we'll look forward to seeing how that is supported by the students and what they have coming. The World Kindness Day was celebrated. They had a Bobcat blue out. Everyone wore blue to acknowledge that. And students wrote kindness pledges and listened to Principal Laus read a story about kindness during morning announcements. They will continue to feature their Takeout Thursdays, partnering with Taza Cafe. PTA helped the 5th grade student council advertise for their program. They are doing a United for the Troops donation drive, and treated staff to cookies during their parent-teacher conference days, and doing a first ever readathon. Final stages of that kicking off in January. Bravo for them. At Farmingville, they had a PTA provided teacher and staff lunch in November. They collected over $2,500 in gift cards for their Thanksgiving baskets that they are beautifully creating for the Women's Center in Danbury. And grades K through 2 were treated to a virtual author visit from Sandra Markle. Each student received a copy of her book, What If You Had an Animal Tongue? Grades 3 through 5 were treated to a virtual author visit from Max Bralier. And each student received a copy of his books, The Last Kids on Earth, Thrilling Tales from the Treehouse. Their kids care, this is still Farmingville, I should go back. Their kids care club collected 127 coats for family and children's aid in Danbury in November. And for December, they are collecting new toys for FNCA Fairfield Children Family and Children Aid as well. Kids Care Club also went caroling at Ridgefield Station for residents that live there. At Eastridge, they had socials for all grades, winter themed, and they will be having them January 21st. They will include DJs and photo booths. Very exciting. There will be a staff holiday lunch on 12/21 and a holiday shopping boutique to support local businesses. At Scotts Ridge, there will be 6th and 7th grade classes with socials, both, sorry, I am reading abbreviated words here. The 6th and 7th grade classes had very well attended socials. They had 2 principals' coffees, 1 virtual and 1 in person, and they're hosting a teacher staff holiday breakfast on Friday the 17th. At Branchville, there was a special services talk where Mr. Margolis and the elementary supervisor, Mr. DeCesare, provided an overview of student support services for parents and answered questions. In January, there will be the rehearsals. Rehearsals will begin for the 5th grade musical Shrek Jr. And there will be a parent-child book club hosted by Mr. Margolis and PTA co-president Angela Rice. Branchville students are currently decorating bags for Meals on Wheels throughout this month, and parents donated hundreds of dollars in Stop and Shop gift cards to Meals on Wheels as well, part of their Branchville Gives Back. At the high school, the PTA has done great work beautifying the school inside and out with festive winter decorations, including planter boxes, and the classic giant snowman is back, which is residing once more in the student center. Thank you for your patience on that. Lots of going on, obviously, and great community spirit and involvement. Very impressive.
Lots going on. Thank you for that. Okay, next up, we have the approval of the November 8th minutes. Do I have a motion?
I move that the Board of Education approve the minutes of November 8th, 2021.
Thank you, Rachel. Do I have a second? Anyone?
I second.
Thank you. Thank you. Is that Selena? Thank you. Any comments or adjustments to be made to these minutes? I didn't have any issues. Anybody else? There being none, all those in favor of approving the minutes from November 8th, 2021, please raise your hands.
Jonathan, sorry.
Yes.
We have to abstain, right? I wasn't at the meeting, and anyone who was not at the meeting abstains, right?
Correct.
So just for the new board members.
Correct.
Aren't those the minutes from the last meeting?
These are the minutes from November 8th. So
Oh, sorry.
your seconding of the motion is accepted.
Right.
But we should only take votes from members that were present that night. So all those in favor who were in attendance, please raise your hands. Ken, are you raising your hand or not? I can't see you. Okay, we do not have a quorum to carry this motion. We'll move this to the next board meeting to go at it a second time. We only have 4 votes at this time. Moving on. Next up is the first discussion item on the World Language Department update. Who's gonna
Okay,
take us out on that?
I'll start, but before I do that, I looked over at Dr. DeSantis on the screen, and I was reminded that this week we have one more announcement. We have a parent survival guide with technology December 16th at 9:30. So I just want to remind families, or quite frankly, with all due respect, Wes, hopefully this is okay. Anyone who would like to join that session, it's live, available on YouTube. So if you're out there in the RPS community somewhere and you want to log on to Wes's session, please don't hesitate to do so. And if you don't know how to do that or how to access it, don't hesitate to reach out. It was communicated in my newsletter on Friday, but as I was watching Wes, I was saying to myself, oh, that's an important opportunity for families. So please tune in. In the event that you can't, it will be recorded, so it'll be available to you later. Okay, now without further ado, I will introduce my colleagues. 3 of our educators are here. We have Rebecca, Allison, and Kristen somewhere on the screen here. There you go. Who will be presenting alongside Corey Gillette on world language. And as the board knows, we're making every effort to bring curriculum to light at these board meetings. And so the last presentation we had was mathematics, not mathematics, that's coming, music. Tonight, we're going to share out world language. For those of you that know a little bit about me, you know that world language holds a very special place in my heart, in addition to food and many other things. But I'm looking forward to it. In fact, I'm meeting with Chef T tomorrow, and I'm combining Portuguese food and language. So that'll be fun for tomorrow, I think it is. But nonetheless, tonight we have my colleagues along with Corey presenting on world language here in RPS, some of the work that's been done, some of the work that they look forward to doing, and then we'll open it up to questions. Corey?
Okay, good evening, everybody. John, can you bring up the presentation? Okay, so before we start this presentation, I just want my colleagues to officially introduce themselves. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Gittins. I'm the World Language Department Leader at Eastridge Middle School.
Hi, I'm Kristen Kleiss. I'm from Scotts Ridge Middle School.
And I'm Allison Power, the Department Chair at Richfield High School.
Great. Next slide, please. So you're going to hear tonight an update on the 612 World Language Department at RPS. Next slide, please. So as you know, one of our board goals is on providing an equitable, assured experience for all of our students as they go through the different pathways at RPS. So in order to do that, we have given departments time together, organized time together since the spring and repeated time this fall and winter to work, to create a common vision, to set short-term and long-term goals, and to start putting it into action. So tonight, what you're going to hear from this department is not so different from what you heard from the K-12 music department. You're going to hear about the vision that they created collaboratively You're going to see the pathways and understand the student participation in grades 6 through 12. And as Susie said, you're going to hear about the past practices in the department, what they're currently doing now, and what they're hoping to do as we move into the future. And then, of course, we'll be happy to take any questions. So to start us off, Allison Powers. Next slide, please.
Good evening, everybody. One of the things that we're most excited about, and I would say that we're most proud of, is that last year, as Corey mentioned, we had this time to really start working together and articulate a 6 through 12 program and to deliver assured experiences to the students. We made a concerted effort to meet as a leadership of the 3 buildings together and to plan time for the 3 departments to meet, to learn together, and to collaborate. Next slide, please. We believe that each of these 21 members of our 6 through 12 department plays an important role on a student's path to language proficiency. And together we created a department vision, and we proudly represent all of them here tonight. Next slide, please. As you can see, our vision for the Ridgefield Public Schools World Language Department. We believe that the ability to speak more than one language is necessary to become a successful participant in 21st century society. We foster curiosity and respect for other cultures through a purposeful progression of authentic proficiency-based activities and experiences, empowering students to take risks using the target language with the ultimate goal of preparing them to participate, collaborate, and problem solve as global citizens. Some words that hopefully are jumping out to you directly reflect our vision of the RHS graduate: curiosity, risk-taking, collaborating. This vision is rooted in our world language, world readiness standards, and in what we know to be best practice with regards to 21st century students. So in order to bring this vision to life, we've had to, and we'll have to continue to re-examine the architecture of our program here in Ridgefield and our individual practices. So tonight, we're really excited to share with you a glimpse of the world language program, past, present, and future. Thanks so much for the opportunity to speak with you this evening, and thank you for your continued support. Rebecca's going to tell you a little bit first about where we've been.
Okay, thank you for that introduction. Next slide, please. All right, well, I will begin by talking about the world language course offerings and participation across both the middle school and the high school. Next slide, please. You will see from this figure that 89% of middle school students have a world language as part of their daily schedule, and therefore are able to begin with level 2 when they enter 9th grade. At the high school level, Italian, Latin, and Mandarin are also offered in addition to French and Spanish. 75% of high school students participate in a world language class, some taking more than one language at a time. That gives us a total of over 2,000 participants across the district. Next slide, please. Allison already shared the World Language Department vision, which we are using to guide us as we work on many exciting changes in our curriculum and in our department in general. Now I would like to reflect on where we started this journey. Next slide. In the past, we used a traditional textbook-based curriculum, which primarily consisted of vocabulary lists, textbook-generated assessments, grammar exercises, and translation. The actual standards were built into the textbooks. This led the student experience to be textbook-centered and focused on grammatical accuracy and vocabulary identification. The teacher experience was similarly textbook-centered, with few opportunities for lesson development based on culture or individual interests. The teachers in our department did an amazing job of including as many authentic and culturally based resources as possible, but due to the structure of the curriculum, it was a challenge. Also, there were alignment challenges, since the 6 to 8 and 9 to 12 curriculums functioned as separate programs. Alignment was through the use of shared textbook and textbook graded assessments. Now that I've talked about where we've been, Allison will tell you a little bit about where we are. Next slide, please.
All right, thank you, Rebecca. So over the last decade, much has changed in what we know about teaching and learning world language. Teaching methods have evolved, students are different, and technology has made it possible to reinvent the learning environment in ways that expand the opportunities for both collaboration and communication with people around the world. There were two pieces of key information, key new learning for us that really motivated us to examine our own practice and to work on evolving and improving student learning. Next slide, please. So what do we know about students today? Well, 21st century students are curious, they're collaborative explorers, they're multitaskers, and they require engagement. We need to be giving them real world situations, contextualized learning experiences, and opportunities for them to have both voice and choice. They have access to multiple technologies at their fingertips. Learning can take place at any space, at any time, and they can find information faster online than we can teach it. And when it comes to world language, they don't want to learn the rules. They don't want to perfect it. They just want to be able to communicate. And they appreciate immediate feedback. At the same time, our national language organization, ACTFL, released the World Readiness Standards. The World Readiness Standards for Learning Languages creates a roadmap to guide learners to develop competence to communicate effectively and to interact with cultural understanding. As you'll see from the graphic here, they focus on 3 types of communication: interpretive, interpersonal, and presentational, around the 5 C's: culture, communication, connection, comparison, and communities. Next slide, please. So the new vision that we talked about, we wrote to reflect this new learning. So last year we began to meet as the leaders of the 3 different buildings, and we started getting the departments together. This year has been no different. This year we actually made it a priority of ours, not only to connect, but to build it in so that teachers would know that every single PD day, every single early release or collaborative time, we'd be touching base and we'd be talking about proficiency and we'd be sharing best practices. It's been really important to us to grow those connections across languages, across levels, and to spend as much time together as possible. We've been writing a collaboratively and agnostic proficiency-based curriculum. For example, all languages begin with personal information. Whether you take Spanish or French at ERMS or CERMS or RHS, those teachers can collaborate around that material. And we've been creating assessments. This year, we're focusing on year 1, so that across languages and buildings, again, we have that consistency. And so teachers have the ability to collaborate. We know that we have to go slow to go fast. And if we can get everybody on board learning how to do this together and experiencing this together, then they're going to be able to pay it forward and do it for themselves. And that's really going to have a meaningful impact on our students. We're also continuing to engage in aligned professional learning. Last year, we read a book series together. We engaged with experts in the field. We all present on our PD days, and we're really committed to growing and evolving in order to deliver the most meaningful and appropriate experiences for our students. Teachers are engaged in collaborative work around research-based best practices, and Kristen's going to tell you about where we're headed.
Thanks, Allison. Next slide, please. So before I speak about our future and all the great things that we have planned coming up, I would like to take a moment to speak to everyone about the word proficiency that keeps coming up. Proficiency is a framework for organizing instruction and curriculum, as well as assessment. In order for students to communicate meaningfully, teachers must provide instruction and practice using those 4 modalities that Allison spoke to. Language learners who engage in meaningful and creative communication are able to move up this proficiency scale during their time with us. The proficiency framework also prepares students for real-world application by building upon what students already know, need to know, and can do. It is a student-centered approach and promotes intercultural communication that students can express themselves appropriately and accurately in authentic context. Finally, proficiency respects the diverse learner by encouraging the development of a wide range of skills and learning strategies. Next slide, please. So here are some of the opportunities that our students are currently engaged in. We certainly, coming back this year after the year that we had last year, are even more committed to providing students those opportunities outside of that typical curriculum-based day that engages them in the culture and provides them with those experiences that we all remember from school. It wasn't necessarily the lesson that we got, it was the experiences that we had when we got to have hands-on opportunities. So for example, our students took advantage of Eiffel Tower building during National French Week. Our Mandarin teacher at the high school does a fantastic job of pulling in a culture that's so many miles away right into our students' fingertips. And really from here, you can see how engaged our students are and happy in our classes. Next slide, please. So where we're headed in the future, there are so many exciting and collaborative opportunities that we're already engaged in as a department. And we are routinely reflecting on our current work to see the impact that it will have on our long-term goals. A short and long-term goal that we are already engaged in is increasing student access to the Seal of Biliteracy. And 101 students at RHS received this distinction on their diplomas in 2021, and we are focused on working with our students to support this achievement and grow that number every year. As a 612 program, we are also currently engaged in writing common assessments, and our continued goal is to use both internal and external assessment data to drive teacher instruction and student learning. This will give our students the ability to reflect on their learning and our teachers the ability to reflect on their teaching. Right now, students are exposed to culture on a daily basis as it's the lens through which we teach our lessons. However, when possible, we would like to provide students with the opportunities to live the culture through international travel. While we're in the position that we're in, though, we are seeking opportunities on an everyday basis locally to give our students the opportunity to use their language with a diverse population to help them grow as global citizens within their own community and give back. This past year, we had 16 awards that were given to RPS students from state and national professional organizations, and we're working really hard to increase not only our student participation in those opportunities in professional organizations, as well as our teacher engagement in them. We're lucky here to have both our current and past presidents of our governing ACFIL organization as colleagues and friends, really, here in Connecticut. They're always available to us to drop either a text or a quick email for guidance. And we're focused on giving our teachers increased opportunities to participate in these professional settings and the opportunities to meet and collaborate with other teachers in surrounding areas to improve on best practices. We can't stress enough that commitment to growing relationships, both within our department and with the greater world language community, because we know that everyone out there is working on this great work together. And through these collaborative opportunities, we can do what's best for the students in our classroom. And this also includes attendance at professional conferences. So finally, we love our program where it is, but we would also love to see it grow, whether that means adding additional languages or knowing that research shows that the earlier students are exposed to language, the stronger their foundation will be for learning them. So the future is looking bright for world language, and we are very excited for it. Next slide, please. We've talked about a lot during our presentation today, but if you'd like to learn more or if your questions aren't answered by the end of this presentation, we encourage you to join us together. Rebecca, Allison, and I will be presenting on Learning a Language for Life on January 13th at 9 a.m., where we will get into more information and some of the nitty-gritty details in addition to answering more of your questions. Thank you so much for your attention tonight. And we will happily, if you go to the next slide, answer your questions if you have any.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Opening the floor to questions, I see Tina's hands first.
Thank you so much. This was really informative, and thank you for all the hard work that you do. I think my question is the obvious one, which you mentioned, Kristen. Why are we not considering world languages in the younger grades? You know, we have a great program 6 to 12. Why are we not expanding this, for lack of a better word, K to 12? That's my first question. My second question is, we can talk about, maybe Corey can answer, do our DERG districts offer that? And the third question is, why these languages? Why do we only focus on these languages? Why not other languages? Why do we not study others? Who makes that decision? How is these decisions made? So sorry, 3 or 4 questions. That's it. I'll let everybody else, but that was my start.
Corey, do you want to you want to kick it off or do you want me to kick it off?
I can kick it off.
All right.
I know that the question about world language at the elementary school is something that has been brought up here and has been looked into. As you can tell, this team very much supports it. And that is something that in our innovation committees and in our look around the DIRG, we see that that is an experience that other students are having that we would like to expand for our students, but it is a process for sure.
Let me just add to that, Corey.
Sure.
If that's okay. To be frank, the only reason you wouldn't do it, in my opinion, is budget, right? Is that we would want to provide our kids with as many experiences as possible. I guess it's time and budget. But what we do know is that the earlier our children are immersed in the language, and we heard a lot tonight about proficiency and culture, and obviously language opens the doors and windows up to understanding perspective and culture and all of that. But there is no doubt that the earlier children are immersed with language, hearing it receptively, and quite frankly, just playing with it, just speaking. It can be as messy as you like, but just speak, the better. And the earlier that they take on that language, the more willing they are to take risks. And if you notice, especially your adolescent students, the greatest challenge, and I think my colleagues will agree with me, having been a world language teacher myself and a bilingual teacher, the greatest challenge for world language students is their willingness to take risks. And adolescents in particular worry about that even in English, right? In life. And now add that in a language where they might say something incorrectly, and that environment hasn't really been there since the start, right? So when you're starting in kindergarten, even if it's for just 20 minutes a day, and you're learning to play with the language just little bits at a time and hearing it, you're far more willing to take a risk as you get older. But I think ultimately, and Corey, you alluded to it, when it comes down to innovations and moving our district forward, at minimum, I think we would be coming to you at some point when we were in a position to do so. And after enough study and a comprehensive presentation, is to propose a shift that would include teaching world language at the elementary level. But there's certainly a budget impact that I don't think the team was ready to do for a number of different reasons quite yet, but it's certainly something on their mind.
So before we move to the next of Tina's questions, if budget aside, there's no academic reason to not have world language in the elementary school years.
No, and in fact,
would that be adding to the school day, the length, or would it be cutting? What would be taken away?
Yeah. So
what are those extra 20 minutes?
Right. That's the study that has to happen, Jonathan. But there's plenty of research that tells us that when children do learn and acquire language, it opens up a great deal of other windows, including vocabulary. It's Latin based, depending upon the language, but vocabulary, the ability to transfer skills, not to mention perspective, understanding of others. So there's so many connections that you can make, but that's certainly work that the curriculum team would need to do to identify where you could push back, because there's always a push-pull when it comes to time. And I think every level would say this, but there's no doubt that the elementary level, I think, has the greatest push. Having been an elementary principal, I remember those days when you were looking at instructional minutes and trying to find time for everything. It was a battle. It was who wants more language arts, who wants more mathematics and music and art and world language. So I think it really needs to be part of a comprehensive study and presentation of the instructional minutes as a whole. And when it's time, I know that our team will do that and do it well and be prepared to answer all of those questions.
So I think the next question was about which languages, why do we have the languages that we have? And at this point, the languages we have are based on enrollment. And from my understanding, there were other languages that were offered, and the enrollment was not enough to support them. However, this team, and you can see how engaging and energized this team is, we are looking into some other possibilities, and we're going to do some surveying of our students, because we also have to find a teacher that's certified to teach the languages for changing a language, and we have to make sure we have enough enrollment to support that. But so that's the short of it.
But, Tina, I think the added piece is that there is, there has to be, a step back to say, like, what's happening globally? Where are the languages that, I'm sensitive to this. I think everybody can be sensitive. We love a particular language and a culture, right? But I think we have to take a step back and say, globally, where's the greatest impact? And is that an offering that our students would want? Because ultimately, as they transition through high school and life, and they're going to acquire a language, they want to be able to use it, right? They want it to be the most useful outside of perhaps travel. They want to be able to say, okay, I can use this language in my work, whatever that work happens to be. So I think that there is that other piece. That said, there's always a sensitivity to a language that kids are accustomed to or that matters to them. There could be a generational perspective on it, a historical perspective. But I think it's important for us to take a step back, a neutral step back, and say, like, let's take a look at what's happening in the world and what languages may be of the greatest value for students in terms of their life outside of schooling. Not to say that there isn't great value personally, but when it comes to the work environment.
Susie, just to throw into, we also have students every single year, Tina, that take AP exams in languages that we don't offer. So students who have interest in language do go through Allison, and she could speak to that at a different time too if you want to talk to her. But if they have an interest in it and there's an AP level course, they can do it as independent studies, and we still let them pursue those interests and take those exams and support those students through that process. So just an added piece there too.
Thank you.
Other board questions? I think it is important what you said, Dr. De Silva, that we not only look at enrollment and what we've done in the past, but what is growing, what is the next language that we should look at, as opposed to what we have looked at, which has grown or shrunk or whatever. But what's going on globally makes a lot of sense to me. Anyone else? Any other questions? Thank you so much for this presentation. These presentations from the departments are some of the most energizing, informative pieces of Board of Education meetings, and we certainly look forward to them. Thank you very much for that.
Gracias.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your work.
Thank you for having us.
Next time in French.
We.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Moving on, next item up is pay to participate.
All right. So I will introduce Mr. Street and Dr. Greenwood tonight, but really I asked Dane to come and present this evening on pay to participate. It was a big conversation that we had last year, in particular at strategic planning, and what ultimately was the Board of Education's goals around pay to participate, whether or not there was the appetite to perhaps transition pay to participate out of our schools and our budget structure. And so you are going to see a shift in the budget with pay to participate as we present in January. But I thought in advance of that it was important to hear from Dane to understand contextually what the thinking is for this coming year and further years. Again, with that goal of, are we ready in Ridgefield to transition away from the pay to participate model, or at least the structure that we currently have, to make it more reasonable for families. So that's why Dane is here tonight. I invited him really to, outside of the budget meetings, to provide the Board of Education and the public an understanding, or a greater understanding of pay to participate and the goal moving forward.
Thanks, Susie. So I'm going to speak with the assumption that the board members all have the memo in front of them that talks about the pay to participate where we are and the proposal that I'm putting forward. Before I get into that, I just wanted to say welcome to our new Board of Ed members. It's the first time I've been presenting to those of you, and I look forward to working with you. And a quick note that our winter season is underway. We had a very successful fall, and our girls hockey team is already 2 games in to the winter season, and our girls basketball team, as of about 2 minutes ago, was up by about 20 at halftime. So we're off to a good start in their first game, and we're looking forward to a bunch of really exciting events for this winter season. And most importantly is that despite some of the COVID measures that are still in place in terms of masks and everything else, that all the sports at the high school will be able to participate this winter, where some of them were not able to last year. So very excited to get our student athletes back out there. As I get into the information about pay to participate, I think I would start by saying I would echo a lot of the comments that were made by the foreign language community that just spoke, and the connections that we all try to make with our students and instill those core values of innovation, collaboration, communication, resilience. You know, I like to run the RHS athletics department in a way where those things are celebrated as well. And those are points of focus for all of our coaches. And so what we do is an extension of the classroom. And I would love to see our participation rates at the high school continue to go up. Right now, on average, our participation rate is roughly 50 to 60% of our RHS students participate in some sports during the course of the year. And I would love to see that number continue to rise. So tonight I come to you talking about one of the things that potentially could be standing in the way for some students, and that is pay to participate. Again, I'm operating with the assumption that you all have the memo in front of you, but I want to just speak briefly to some of the content there. So we have had a pay to participate model at the high school since 2001. It started as a $35 per athlete fee. It's been as high as $250 per athlete per season. And for the last 10 years, actually this will be year 12, it's been a consistent $225 per athlete per season. There are many organizations that are connected to high school sports, especially in the state of Connecticut, that have put out their position statements opposing pay to participate structures or pay to play structures. Some of those organizations include the CIAC, the Connecticut Association of Administrators of Health and Physical Education, the Connecticut Association of Public School Superintendents, the Connecticut High School Coaches Association, and the Connecticut Association of Athletic Directors. And if you have that memo, I did link to those position statements. And one of the things that's worth mentioning in there is that their position statements reference studies that show a stronger correlation between participation in high school extracurricular sports and future success than things like standardized tests and future success. So the relationships are there. Participation in extracurricular activities and in particular extracurricular sports at the high school is it's a very rewarding thing, and it helps students develop in ways that they may not be able to in the classroom. So having said all that, I wanted to shine the spotlight on our pay to participate. I did look at our DIRG A. Actually, we'll look at 2 things. One is the statewide data, and one is comparison to DIRG A. In the state, we've seen a decrease over the last dozen years or last 10 years. There were 45 schools that reported a pay to play or pay to participate model in 2012. The last time the statewide data was collected was in 2019, and that number had dropped to 34 schools that were operating under some pay to participate structure. Of those 34, only 8 districts reported charging over $175 per athlete per season, and we were one of those 8. When we compare to the other DIRG A programs, we are the outlier. There are 7 high schools in DIRG A. 2 of them do not charge any participate fees. One of them charges only for sports which incur rental costs, and the other programs are significantly lower than ours. Joel Barlow charges $65 per athlete, Weston is $100, and Wilton is $125. So taking all that into account and trying to reduce or eliminate some of the barriers that may stand in the way to people participating, it is going to be my proposal included in this year's budget request for athletics that we begin a phasing out process. My budget proposal that was submitted to the superintendent and will be shared with you in January calls for a reduction from $225 per athlete per season this year down to $200 per athlete per season next year. And then each subsequent year, it would be my goal to continue that reduction and go to $150 per athlete per season the following year, down to $100 the year after that, down to 50 the year after that. And then by 26, 27, we will have eliminated the pay to participate structure at the high school. Now, obviously, that type of a move or that type of a plan will simply mean that of the overall athletics budget, there will be a larger percentage of that coming from Board of Ed funds as opposed to the current percentage that's funded by the Board of Ed and then additional pay to participate money coming in. But that is the plan that I would like to put forward. And as I said, my budget proposal for this year will ask for that reduction down to $200 per athlete per athlete per season beginning next year. The budget impact for next year, again, it's always a little bit of a guessing game in terms of pay to participate because it is based on the number of athletes that come out each year. But I estimate that will be roughly a $36,000 increase in what the Board of Ed side of the budget would be for next year. In the subsequent years, that number goes up because, again, calling for a $50 per athlete reduction per season. Each year after that would be roughly $68,000 to $70,000 per year. And I think I would just, remind Board of Ed members and everybody who's listening that this is, it is something that sort of hides in the shadows at times. People don't think that it's an issue or a reason why people may not participate in our sports, but it is, and especially for those families that have multiple student athletes at the high school. If you have two kids and they're all playing and they're each playing 3 sports, that's $1,350 per year to participate in our athletics program. And if you happen to be one of those lucky families that has 3 kids participating in 3 sports, that goes over $2,000 a year to participate in their public high schools extracurricular activities. So it definitely is a factor. I know there are some questions. I will mention just, to make sure that everyone has the information, we do have a waiver process in place in the district so that families who need assistance can apply for a waiver of that pay to participate fee. But it is a factor that sometimes families who don't qualify for a waiver are still struggling to make that happen. So I think I will stop there and turn it back over. I don't know if Dr. Greenwood had anything to add, or we can open it up for questions.
No, I'm good, Dane. Thank you.
Yep.
Dr. Greenwood, could I just ask a question? And I should probably know this by now, but I don't. Are there any other extracurriculars outside of the athletics where we ask kids or their families to contribute to the activity?
No, I mean, we certainly have some a field trip or a club event here and there we might need in terms of transportation or something like that, but nothing that's in order to do it, you have to pay.
In order to participate, you need to play blank. That's not the case. Thank you.
Just an item of clarification before we go further. My understanding of how we changed the funding for athletics is on your note about more of a percentage coming from the Board of Ed. 100% is now coming from the Board of Ed. So this reduction would hit the total Board of Ed budget, not specifically athletics. Is that correct? And Ken, you're nodding your head, right?
So I think what Dane is trying to describe, Jonathan, is his cost center within the Board of Education budget. So unlike we did make that shift to have all athletics be a part of the Board of Education budget, which is happening this year, but within that one cost center, that's where you're going to see the increase in the budget on Dane's side.
Right. Yeah, just trying to be clear. Liz and then Tina.
So where do you intend to take this money from to cover the pay to play fees as it degrades, or is this going to be pushed to the voters as an increase in the overall budget?
As of right now, oh, sorry, Dane, go ahead.
That's okay, go ahead.
As of right now, this would be an increase in the overall Board of Education budget.
So just to clarify, so that if people read the notes or watch the video, this means a tax increase on the town of Richfield, not just for those students who do participate, but every taxpayer and property taxpayer in the town will then cover athletics, even though we already have challenging budget. And I'm not against the idea, but when you start to talk about language arts, not having enough money to put in additional language classes versus pay to play, I think there's some I hope that the public that watches these starts to think about that and the priorities of our town and education system.
Yeah,
so the money only goes so far.
I think you bring up a good point. And when the entire superintendent's budget is communicated to the Board of Ed, and, you know, depending upon where the Board of Education looks at that budget and makes decisions around that, then yes, we're going to have to make choices, whether it's in the athletics or in another cost center for sure. But it is
right, like art teachers in all the elementary schools, right? I mean, I just want to make sure people understand that the money is either a tax increase or we continue to trade off curriculum.
Not sure I understand.
Last year, we were unable to fund art teachers and had art on the cart, and it was a very big issue for many of our constituents. So if we are in that situation again, the option will be to increase taxation on the town to cover those and to cover the pay-to-play reductions over the next few years. I think it's quite clear. So I'm not opposed to the idea. I just want to make sure that the public understands that this is a tax increase.
Okay. Tina?
Yeah, Dane, maybe Dr. De Silva, you can answer. Do we know, I mean, roughly, do we have an understanding of how much this would add to our budget? I know is that the number 60?
It's 30, this year would be $36,000. That because it's not a full reduction. So what Dane is doing this year is reducing it by $25. Is that accurate, Dane? 25?
Yep, the proposal is
25. So it's a
reduce.
total of $36,000 for this year. But what Dane was looking to provide you was the greater context. At some point, this board may say, we don't have an appetite to go to zero, right? That may be the case. To Liz's point, decisions will have to be made. That said, this year, if Dane was to look at a trajectory to eventually go with no pay to participate fees, as again was part of the dialogue in our strategic planning committee last year, then this is what it would look like over the course of 5 years. That said, for this year and this year's budget, and Dane's going to present his whole budget, I just felt it was important since this was a topic that came up last year. And so that we're not having any surprises during the budget process, that this was something that we could communicate a little bit earlier.
I think to Dane's point, and I've been watching these meetings for years, and I know some erstwhile board members really felt strongly about it. I do understand your point that there are families who struggle to pay this. I also understand Liz's point that this is an extracurricular. This is not part of the school day. I completely get that. There are choices that are going to be made. But I do appreciate the fact that this costs people. You know, they also pay for Booster Club and stuff. So I think this will be a board, for lack of at this time, I think this will be a board discussion. You know, we're a new board, where our priorities are, what our budget looks like. We have to make, what choices will we have to make? But I do want to point out that, Dane, I do understand where this is coming from. I have so many friends who are struggling with this. I understand the backstory, why this has started, why there was so much passion, and why there's the history behind this. So I do want to highlight that, but I also want to acknowledge that I do understand Liz's point. We did make hard decisions last year. And we want to bring world languages to elementary school, hopefully. And our budgets historically are tough. This town does not appreciate high budgets. I mean, parents, it cannot be pushed onto town. So we will have to make those decisions. So I'm just highlighting that. I think it's a discussion we will have to have at some point in time. But thank you for sharing that. I think it's also important for the new board to understand.
No, I appreciate that. And I would say, Liz, I'm certainly not arguing that this is more important or less important. But what I do know is that I've been in front of the board for 6 years now talking about a reduction of pay to participate. And I've always been told, maybe, or let's put a plan together. This is the plan. I'm happy to do it in pieces if we can. And if it means we take one step and we stay there for a period of time, at least we are closer to where I think we should be in terms of the burden on some of our families in the district. So I completely understand where you're at and happy to have the discussion.
Yeah, and I'm not opposed to it on principle, Dana. I think people just need to be aware that this money comes from somewhere, and it either comes from every taxpayer or the people who participate. Those are the options, right? Whether one way or the other. So we'll have to have those discussions.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Dane. You were asked to put together a plan, and this is a sensible plan. I appreciate you putting that in front of us.
Thanks, Jonathan.
I did see other hands. Selena, do you have your hand up?
I think it's important to remember too, Dane, you mentioned that there's waivers right, for families, but I think a lot of families don't, if they're going through a rough time or whatever, they don't necessarily want everybody to know their business. So they're not going to apply for those waivers.
So
Their kids, they
Yeah.
don't play. And just like, like my children, at the time when German was offered, they didn't take German, but so we all do pay for things that our children don't attend, and the town does pay for. So, I think $36,000, hopefully none of our art teachers make that little bit of money. If they do, we need to rethink our salaries here in Ridgefield. So I think that's amazing that we're able to, that you've done the work and that we could actually let our students play for $36,000. Kudos to you for doing that. I admire you. But I do think the town needs to remember that there are people who simply have so much pride. They're going through a tough time and they're not going to come to anybody and say, I need a waiver for my children. And the children ultimately suffer for the parents' pride. I'm not going to judge the pride. It is what it is. So.
Yeah, I will say that it is there is that aspect for sure. And I will reiterate to anybody who is facing challenging times that we do keep any waiver requests completely confidential. The information goes directly to Don Norton in the business office. So if there is somebody out there who's struggling with that, the information can be found on the RHS Athletics website and you can submit it. And the only people that would know would be the person submitting and Don Norton in the business office. So it is, we try to make it as secure a process as possible to help those families who are struggling. So.
Thank you for calling that.
And I am sensitive too to keeping taxes low. Obviously, God knows they're high enough. So, if there's a way that we can do that, but thank you for doing that work. I appreciate it and for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks, Selena. Any other questions or comments? Again, thank you, Dane.
Jonathan, I think Rachel's hand is up.
Oh, hi, Rachel. You're up.
Thank you so much, Dane. I'm really looking forward to our budget season and going over the athletic budget. I just want to make a couple of comments. I really often think about the mental health of our children. And I do think of sports as one of those outlets, just like music and the arts for them. And if we don't support the emotional and social aspects of education, then the academic part is going to suffer. So I would definitely be in support of phasing out pay to participate, if not doing away with it in its entirety. But that's something that will come across in our budget discussion, because parents that do have multiple children, it can be costly for them. And by taking that step of reduction or doing it away, well, now you are providing an outlet that a child, even if it's just one student, may have not had before. And now they have that. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And I will just add as part of the conversation here that, this is one plan. It's not the only potential plan. There are lots of districts that have things like family caps or second child discounts, or, there are other ways that we can try to attack this without making it a priority that costs the district other initiatives. So I'm certainly open to that discussion. I think any movement in the reduction direction is a step in the right direction. And I look forward to trying to make that happen over the next handful of years.
Thank you, Dane. Anyone else? And Susie, let me know if I miss any hands.
It's the teacher instinct. I think we're okay.
All right. Thank you very much. Next up is the class size report. Who's going to take us through that?
So Karen is actually going to be presenting primarily, but one of the things that I do want everyone to notice that I think could be really helpful, at least it is for me, it's not necessarily part of Karen's presentation tonight, but as you look at your staff class size report and staff accounting, it's a pretty big book, but right at the front of the book, you'll see the actuals by grade level and the projected, and you have back from 2016, 17 school year, and then on. So you'll notice, for example, this school year, we projected 4,439 children. and our actual is 4,528. So fast math, that's about 89 kids. Fast math, you can multiply 89 times $18,000, let's say, on average for per pupil cost, and you're somewhere in that $1.6 million. So I think that's just an important piece of information of how really the projections versus actuals can impact a school budget right at go. Okay. All right, Karen, do you want John to put up the presentation?
Yes, please. And I just want to do just a little bit. Tonight, Board of Education, you do have the 2021-22 class size and staff accounting report. This is information based upon October 1, 2021. This is not an enrollment report. This is the number of students per class in our K-12 classrooms, as well as the staff accounting of our full-time equivalent FTE on October 1. I am pleased to have several administrators here with me tonight. So I'd like to just do some introductions and say that Jake Greenwood, our RHS principal, Jarrett Pepe, our RHS assistant principal, Timothy Salem, Scotts Ridge Middle School principal, Keith Margolis, Branchville Elementary principal, and Ellen Tuckner, VPS principal, are here with me today as well. So tonight we're going to give you a brief summary of the class size averages and some highlights per level, followed by the staff accounting on October 1. And we are here for any questions as well. So I will turn it over to Jarrett Pepe and Dr. Greenwood to begin with the high school.
You can go to the next slide, John. Thank you. Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Jarrett Pepe, assistant principal at Ridgefield High School. I'm going to go through just a few brief slides to talk about how our scheduling numbers worked out for this school year. Next slide, please, John. Thank you. So this slide here shows you the average class size by department at the high school. And these are the trends for our past 6 years. And if you look at our 13 departments total, our average difference between this year and last year, the average variance is only 0.6 of a student. And if we look at our 12 out of those 13 departments, we're within plus or minus 1.5 students. Our students need to take 25 credits in their time here at the high school, and these departments give them those variety of pathways to get to those credits. And our core classes are sitting at an average of 19.5 students, so we're happy with those numbers. Next slide, please, John. This slide shows what percentage of students are taking those courses in the listed departments. If you'll notice, some of those numbers are over 100%. That just reflects that students can double up in certain core courses. A student may take 2 science labs or take 2 math courses in a given year. And it also shows if students take a core class in that subject and one of the department's electives. Our biggest differences noted here, our science department did have the largest decline, but science does still remain our top department in terms of student enrollment with all of our elective enrollments and our students who do take those double labs. Our business posted our largest gain from year to year, and they were up by about 7.5%. Next slide, please, John. So just some summary and highlights. As we said, our class sizes remain pretty consistent across our subject areas. We are happy with our diverse pathways and number of courses we offer to students. We're approaching 200 courses at the high school that we offer our students and get scheduled for them. We're happy to say over 98% of our 13,000 course requests were met during this year's scheduling process. And our students really do continue to fill up those schedules with those exciting courses with a 6.72 average credit enrollment. So our students are pretty fully booked at the high school. And in our juniors and senior year, they're not required to even maintain those courses. So we're proud of them for doing that. Our elective choices, we had some marginal shifts that we noted last year. And our last 2 highlights here, our block schedule is in year 2. We had to implement that in response to our planning for the COVID cohorts. So we are still monitoring that. And we have some focus groups and some surveys looking to gather some data on how everyone feels it's going. So some students love it with, no homework the next day in class. And other students, I think, do feel that it's a long day. So we're going to get some numbers behind those feelings and move on from there. And then two of the things we got to offer in this year's schedule we are happy about are counseling seminars and our Algebra 1 labs. And we really want to personalize learning at the high school. And these are two ways we were really happy with so far how they rolled out this year. Our counseling seminars are developmental lessons given in clusters of 5 to each of our students in the grades. I think Mr. Houlihan will be up in a future board presentation to talk about the efforts the counseling department made this year. And then our math seminars, just looking at a quick glance of comparing data from this year to last year, our Algebra 1 students enrolled in that math lab have D's and F's 30% lower than last year and 60% lower than our pre-pandemic scores in those classes. So we're happy with those two new initiatives. Any questions for the high school? I don't know if Karen, you want to run through the rest of it?
Nope, just we'll go each section at a time. So does any board member have any questions for the high school?
See Tina?
Sorry, it's me again, but thank you so much. And I'm just asking these questions. I understand this, but I'm just asking these questions because they come up during budget season, indirectly or directly sometimes. Enrollment's always a big topic. And there are some classes, I went through the packet, and at high school, there are some classes that have 12 or 13 students enrolled, right? And the question comes up is, can we combine these classes as a potential cost savings? Why or why not? That's my first one. Then I have another one. I'll ask that later. And again, this is more for the board members, the community, and everyone who's listening, because it will eventually come up during budget season, which is next month.
Yes, and when you see those class size variances, right, it does. We do have some lower numbers of sections, and we also have some higher numbers. To give students their choice in a high school schedule, we do have to run, classes at some of those lower levels. If we were to combine sections, for example, let's say we took a low period 3 and a low period 4 and combine them, whatever students had in those other periods just might not line up. So we offer a lot of singletons at the high school, and a lot of advanced AP coursework that might only meet during 1 or 2 periods, especially with our science labs taking up 2 periods. So, those small class sizes do definitely stand out, and we do our best to even those out and not have that disparity. But in doing that, that would cost student choices. So we try to say, if we can stay within our FTE allotment and not incur any additional budget costs, then, at least I'm okay with having that lower class and also having that higher class, versus if we force them to be at average, then what happens is students lose out on those choices.
And Tina, that's exactly why we present on the department averages, because sometimes there has to be a lower class, but then conversely, there could be a higher class somewhere else.
Yes, thank you. And my kid loves the high school, so that's a total aside. I think he's doing great. But I do appreciate, I think also to your following up, it's like dovetailing off your presentation. And again, this is for everybody who's listening in. I really appreciate that 98% of the child's first choice, a student's first choice is met, whatever they choose as an elective. So for anyone who's wondering, and that's why I'm going to ask this question, this is not personal because my kid is very happy. So I want to make that very clear. The 2%, is it because of enrollment? Is it budget size? Is it budget? There's a budgetary implication? Is it enrollment? And I also go back to a few years ago, we had a very popular German program that was cut, and that was due to enrollment. So I'm guessing it's a budget implication, right?
Honestly, I do believe those conflicts are 2 courses that are just happen to be offered at the same time. When you run into a number of, junior and seniors taking level 3 and 4 and 5 in AP languages, we can only offer 1, maybe 2 of those sections. So then if you have a unique student who has, an AP Physics 2 course and a certain, math course, AP Stats, BC Calc, they're taking amazing courses. So we do our best to configure it so they can get that highest percentage of choices. So that last 2%, I would not equate that to a specific budget item. And comparing like to German, certification also becomes an issue too in certain courses. So if we only offer a small amount or a small number of sections, sometimes staffing becomes difficult. So
fair, thank you. Just wanted to make sure that everybody understands why it is the numbers it is.
Are there any other questions for the high school level while we have Jarrett and Jake? Okay, hearing none, then I'm going to turn it over to Tim Salem, principal of Scotts Ridge Middle School.
Good evening, everyone. I too just wanted to take a moment to welcome the new board members. This is my first opportunity to welcome them, and certainly thank our returning board members. And I'm here just to represent the middle schools for our class size report. So we can just go to the next slide. As you can see, our two monikers are there. So this is the class averages for this current school year. As you can see, for the most part, they're fairly consistent across the board. There's a little bubble up because our 6th grade is obviously a little bit bigger at Scotts Ridge. But other than that, the classes by and large are pretty static and even across those sections of the major core classes. We can go to the next slide if you don't mind. So here's where you may notice some differences, primarily because student choice comes into play. In the last slide, that would be in world language. In this slide, primarily in music, where we give our students the opportunity to make some choice. So there are fluctuations from year to year in those courses based on those choices. Where you see NA for family consumer science, just to reiterate and remind our families and our board members, students in grade 6 do not take family consumer science due to the health requirement and the depth of the curriculum for 6th grade health. And so that is why that's not taken there. So if there were questions around that, I just wanted to make sure that people were aware of that. Then of course, if you're looking and you're saying, well, gosh, why are those numbers at Scotts Ridge for family consumer science and health so low? Any board member who happened to take the tour with us last year when we were doing our COVID preparations, you might recall, when you walk into the Scotts Ridge Family Consumer Science classroom, it is exceptionally small. And so our numbers in that class for safety reasons have to be smaller. And the offset of that is the numbers between health and family consumer have to remain low. And of course, this year, as you may have heard in the music presentation, we're really excited in 6th grade to be piloting that sessions model. Big thank you to Corey Gillette and the music department for making that happen. Where you might look and say, well, gosh, why on East Ridge does it say 41 for 6th grade math or for 6th grade band? It's not an anomaly. It's just that we graph them differently. We're not trying to confuse anybody. But in the sessions model, what's beautiful and wonderful about the sessions model is providing our music teachers the opportunity to work with percussionists and saxophonists and in the trombone section, so individually they can work on those skill sets. So that 41 is not one period, it's spread out over the course of periods. It's just noted differently in this graph where we put the average and East Ridge has the entire number. So I just wanted to make sure that that I pointed that out. Okay, we can go to the next slide, please, John. And here are just some highlights. As those of you who've been following this for a long time, you know that back in 2016-17, the middle schools started the 50-50 split. And what that means for those who may not know is that means there's 3 feeder schools for each of the middle schools, right down the middle, 50-50. Right now, those are our current numbers. So at Scotts Ridge, we are at 530. At East Ridge, that number is 503. There's 2 teams now, where there used to be 3 teams per grade level at East Ridge and 2 at Scotts Ridge. Now both middle schools have 2 teams at each grade level. As you saw, our core classes for the most part are comparable, and the total enrollment is a difference right now of 27 students. One of the things that we're really excited about for this year, and again, this goes back to anybody who may have had children in Richfield for a while, you might remember we used to have what we called activity days. And what that meant was students could choose an activity that was offered by a teacher. And really it was based on both teacher interest and student interest. And it was an exciting way to end the week. And years ago, we phased that out in in favor of an advisory program, which is also extremely important. But what we decided to do in order to give our students some more voice and choice in middle school was to bring those activity days back at both middle schools for 6 weeks on Fridays, and give teachers a chance to really be invigorated by teaching something that they would really enjoy, and having students sign up for something that they would be excited about taking to end the week. And I'm just going to read some of the options have been really awesome. We have things like coding and scratchboard art and geography beehive with Mr. Peterson, digital painting and Jamboard, wiffle ball, real trivia, chess, mindfulness. So it gives students an opportunity to choose one of these activities, and for 40 minutes on a Friday for 6 consecutive Fridays, they get a chance to join those teachers in those really awesome, fun, energizing activities to end the week. And I have to tell you, we did our first 6 weeks beginning in September, and the feedback from both students, staff, or feedback from students, staff, and families was really, really wonderful. So again, we're really excited to reintroduce that into our advisory program. And then our last note, and I don't think this is a surprise to anyone, is that we just really need to monitor our enrollment projections as we move forward. I think that once if we look at the projections and we look to about that 24-25 school year, and you start to see, the numbers at Scotts Ridge begin to creep up, that's where we may need to take a look and start thinking, about those numbers a little bit more pragmatically. So thank you. I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions for the middle schools? I already see Tina's hand.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you so much. And Tim and I've gone back on this for even when I was at Scotts Ridge. We've talked about capacity. So I think it's more a comment and just an observation. Just as you said, we know that Scotts Ridge was built for 40% of whatever the middle school population was. And we can see it's creeping up. The numbers are higher than East Ridge. My only quick question is, and you did mention that is, maybe that's just the only, because of the higher enrollment that Scotts Ridge has, and capacity-wise, has it made a difference, COVID? I know it was a COVID year, so maybe it's a tough question to answer. Just, capacity, how you utilize space must have changed because of the way it is built, the way just Scotts Ridge is built. That's my only question. And the other question is just an observation. And just as you said, for the new board, and as we develop on program, as we develop our budget and look into the next few years, we have to keep an eye. I haven't did the numbers. We have 174 kids plus minus 10, whatever, coming up next year. And they're much lower coming into East Ridge. And it keeps adding to the fact that this middle school, at least Scotts Ridge Middle School, is not built for such a high population. So just an observation on that. My only question was on that, how capacity-wise, if it's effective.
Yeah, so Tina, I think you know that we've really had to think outside of the box as we saw our numbers start to creep up. And so, we've taken some proactive approaches. We've actually changed our former computer labs that used to be computer labs have been transitioned into classrooms. We've had to use some teacher break spaces and also transition them into student use spaces as well. So just in terms of space, anybody who participated in the tour with us last year knows that we've really creatively thought outside of the box and used every conceivable space as we currently exist in terms of being able to expand opportunities for our students. So we have done our due diligence as far as that's concerned.
And that said, Tina, thanks, Tim.
Are there any other questions?
Oh, sorry, Tim. I think you're on a slight delay. But that said, Tina, I think what is important to note is.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Despite Scotts Ridge's best efforts, at some point, sooner than later, the board will have to look at what these numbers will look like a few years down the line, because at some point, regardless of you using all the space, you just don't have enough room for the number of kids. You simply can't do it without really changing the experience that I believe our parents are come to expect from our middle schools, and what our middle schools, how they need to plan for children at that age level. So I think it's a real conversation that we need to have sooner than later.
Completely agree. That was the reason for the question. And we've talked about it for years. I know that. So it's very important that we start these conversations much sooner. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions for the middle school before we move on to elementary? Okay.
We can move on.
Great. So now I'd like to introduce Keith Margolis, principal of Branchville Elementary.
Good evening, everyone. Yes, welcome to our new board members. Thank you to all the board members for their service. I'm Keith Margolis, principal at Branchville, and I'm here with my colleague Ellen Tuckner, who will also present. If you don't mind advancing to the next slide, I'll orient you on our overall school enrollment. You may note that on this slide, you can find the total in each grade, followed by, in parentheses, the number of sections or classes at each grade, and then the average class size for all the elementary schools in Ridgefield. You can find the total enrollment by school. You may also find the total enrollment by grade level. In a moment, Ellen Tuckner is going to talk about class size breaks in the Board of Education guidelines that determine the number of sections that you find here, and of course, then have influence on that average class size as well. There's a lot of information to look at there. I know you have the packet. We're going to advance to the next slide, but of course, we'll have questions. Ellen?
I'm on mute, excuse me. Thank you, Keith. Good evening, everyone. So as Mr. Margolis just shared, all of our elementary classes are below our maximum size guidelines with 103 total sections across all 6 of our schools. And those guidelines fall at kindergarten and grade 1 have a maximum of 21 students per class. Grade 2 has a maximum of 24 students, and grades 3, 4, and 5 have a maximum of 25 students. So all of our class sizes at this time this year have fallen within those guidelines, with nobody being in a position where we're beyond that throughout the year itself. Barlow Mountain, Ridgeberry, and Scotland schools all transitioned to Scotts Ridge, and Branchville, Farmingville, and Veterans Park transition to East Ridge Middle Schools. So with that, if there are any questions for Keith and I, we're happy to answer them.
Questions at the elementary level? Gina? No?
No. Just thank you, and just regular observations, but no questions for them.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions at all by any board member?
Now we can move to the staff accounting.
Okay, perfect. So then finally, you will see the staff accounting for the 2021-22 school year. It is by the full-time equivalent. So there are 3 databases in this summary. It will show what was our actual FTE for the 2021 school year, what did we budget for the 21-22 school year, and what was our actual FTE for the 21-22 school year on October 1. So primary note, we really do look at our actual 2021 to 2022 versus budget. And so you will see that the primary driver is our teachers, and you will see that there was an increase of 3.5 FTE. You may recall that Dr. De Silva had presented early in the year that we were over budget by 2 elementary classrooms. So we had budgeted 101. And as Ms. Tuckner just said, we had actually 103. So we were over by 2 elementary classrooms. We're actually over by 2.5 FTE in special education. Why you will see only a net increase of 3.5 is because we're actually under at the middle school by a total of 0.8. And that was primarily through Unified Arts and World Language and a math section that we thought we might need that we did not, and an additional 0.2 at the high school level. So that was a full 1.0 reduction, which meant our net increase was only 3.5 instead of the 4.5. Slight change at the paraeducators. Primary driver was actually some COVID staffing for instructional services. However, there were many small additional offsets that reduced that to make that only a 0.166 increase, so that you can see that our total increase was a 1.6 increase to see that our total increase was a 3.66 increase over budget. Just as a comparison, we do show what our actual was in 2021 versus our actual for 21-22. And for that, you can see it is a net difference of 7.815. Does any board member have any questions about the staff accounting section of this report?
Anyone on the staff accounting? No, it looks like we're good there. Everything was pretty much going with budget, other than the classroom breaks.
Correct. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, team.
Shall we move on to the district provided bus transportation pilot?
Sure, thank you. So in your packet tonight, you have a memo labeled Pilot School Transportation Vehicle. Much like the earlier conversations that we've had when we were talking about looking at a slight increase in the budget with pay to participate, we're also looking at where we can find adjustments in the budget. And there's no doubt special education will be a theme in this budget season. We communicated that out. Dr. Hanaway and Dr. Shoa presented I believe in early October what some of the themes that we were seeing with special education were. And certainly we've seen an increase in the number of students in district that are now receiving specialized instruction. We're also seeing a number of students move into district that require specialized instruction, but we also have a number of students that receive specialized instruction and a different program out of district. And so looking at and analyzing some of the cost related to transportation, we looked at that as a possible area of savings. And let me explain a little bit more. We have First Student is our primary bus company, and they serve primarily in district. They also serve our special education students through ESY and also serve our students in the 18 to 22 program. So for example, our 18 to 22 students may transport to different jobs in the area, and First Student provides transportation for those children. Oftentimes we look to using a small van. Sometimes we're able to do that, sometimes we're not. Additionally, we transport students out of district to specific placements. And depending upon the student, the distance, and the additional staffing, that may change the cost. So for example, in my memo, I provided one example. We have, as one example, just to be clear, this is one example. We have a student that leaves town, goes to a particular school. That particular student needs a paraprofessional to stay on the bus with him or her. And that transportation, that run is from Ridgefield to that place. And then at the end of the day, from that place to Ridgefield. The cost for that student for the school year is about $120,000. We hire an outside transportation service to do that work. Obviously, in the middle of the day, if these were our folks, they could be doing other work and perhaps even transporting students, let's say in our 18 to 22 program. What I can tell you is that we don't just have one student or two students in that position. We have several. The dynamics are different. Some students can't transport with other children. Some children are going out to one end of the state and other children are going to the other end of the state. So as we were analyzing our costs, we looked at what our possibility or what the possibilities were for us to try to reduce that line item in out of district transportation. And so we looked at the possibility of bringing in as a pilot a school transportation vehicle or possibly two. And so naturally the initial cost would be higher, but the reoccurring costs could possibly be lower. So Joe looked at the state bid and we found a transportation vehicle. I think it's a 10-passenger van. The state bid would indicate that that van would be approximately $42,000. That would be created in a way that would make it work for the students that we're serving. Of course, let me just say this, is to purchase that state van or the van that's on the state bid, it takes about 30 weeks to get a vehicle because of the shortages. And I don't think you guys even want to hear that anymore, the word shortages, and we won't blame it on the microchip or anything like that. But the reality is if we were to make that decision, we would make it now. The reason it's a pilot is because potentially we don't know what the exact amount of savings is going to be. We anticipate that there will be savings. We also anticipate there might be challenges in terms of finding drivers or finding the actual buses if they're delayed even further than 30 weeks. What I can tell you is this past year, so what I can also tell you is that there's some flexibility. So this past year, as an example, when we had issues with driver shortages that were not for student, we did not have that issue here. We were stuck. There were times in which children couldn't go to school, or we had to hire a cab, or we had to hire an Uber, or we had to reimburse a parent. If we had had this option available to us, we could have offered that to our students. So what our proposal here is to pilot one or possibly two school transportation vehicles for the fall. We would be ordering them now. In terms of funding, we'd either look at the possibility if we could use capital money, or we look at our ESSER 3 grant. And let me explain that a little bit. I do believe that we could readjust if needed the ESSER 3 grant because what we've learned is through the driver shortages that we've experienced, having the flexibility or having school bus transportation available to us, we can have more opportunities for access for kids. So I do think that we might have that option available to us. The reality is if you were to ask me what exactly we would be saving, I can't tell you that for sure. We're estimating. Really, what we've learned from other districts that are doing this is that the cost of transporting one student would have to be at about $80,000 for us to be for us to have any savings. So we obviously know we have that. We have several students that are at $120,000 plus, not to mention having the flexibility to use that staff, i.e. the driver and or the para throughout the day when they're not transporting the student. In addition, again, as I mentioned, the 18 to 22 program, we might be able to pull back some savings from using our current provider, which is First Student during the day. So that's our proposal. Again, it's connected to budget. And I think there's also something to say that there's flexibility. So it's budget and flexibility and giving this a go for the fall of 2022. So hopefully
can I add one piece there?
Yeah.
So this is the type of thing that is really like a year 2, 3, 4 savings more than year 1, but it really depends on where students are going. So Susie gave the example of the really expensive run. Part of what makes these we call them runs, transportation runs, really expensive is that finding vendors is not easy, and vendors can come from pretty far away. So the travel to Ridgefield, to the school, back to wherever the vendor is, back to the school, back to Ridgefield, back to the vendor. So essentially, we are keeping that vehicle throughout the duration of the day. So it's not just a matter of like, how could it cost so much for a ride or the gas and the para? It can also just be the fact that they can't use that vehicle depending on the distance throughout anywhere else throughout the day. So part of that is a singleton that may be really expensive, but then we have a lot of runs that are shared students who either go in the same school or schools in close proximity. And so year to year, we'd have to assess what would be the greatest cost efficiency, and also providing a level of continuity for students in terms of how much money would be saved.
So if we're looking at net savings in years 2, 3, 4, we're looking at net neutral in year 1 or net?
I don't think we'll be net neutral. I think we'll be somewhere around that 50, again, removing the cost of the vehicles out of the equation. So if we move the cost of the vehicles out of the equation, I think we would somewhere be around $50,000-$60,000. Again, it really does depend, as Liz mentioned, which routes we select, how many students, how much the initial cost is. And what Liz was mentioning about, as an example, the vendor may be in Trumbull. So they're coming from Trumbull, picking up in Ridgefield, and perhaps going to Madison, then going from Madison back to Trumbull. We don't have access because they're not providing access to us during the day. So then they're back in Trumbull, perhaps, doing other work, and then coming back to Madison, and then back to Ridgefield, and back to Trumbull. So we don't even have access to them in the time that they're not providing services to kids. This would allow for that. Again, that may be a more complex run that we can't necessarily provide for. In other school districts that are similar to ours, they've used custodians and paraprofessionals as their drivers, that they get licensed. The paraprofessionals obviously do the work of paraprofessionals, and then come provide supervision coverage, let's say at the elementary level during that window. So they're able to use them during that middle of the day opportunity, and then they might hop back on the bus, or you might use a different paraprofessional. So you might have a morning para and an afternoon para, because you might have an early school and a late school, gives you the greatest bang for your buck in terms of staffing. I think that this year, for those school districts that did have school bus transportation vehicles of their own, ran into some trouble with staffing them like the big bus companies did. But because those school districts that had multiple folks that were able to drive found success. And so we're hopeful that we can do the same here. Again, looking at the data that we have, I do believe that if we taking the buses out of the equation, the cost of the buses, whether it's capital or ESSER, that we could perhaps save about $50,000 or $60,000 this coming year.
In the first year. Thank you. Questions from board members? Liz and then Ken.
Yeah, so thank you guys for pulling this together. As some of you know, I came from a district that owned their own fleet of buses, and it was the one reason that we were able to keep property taxes in that particular district significantly lower and have better transportation than the neighboring district of the exact same size in the same town. So I'm a big proponent of this. I think it's, especially when you need modified vehicles, it makes perfect sense. I think it's a proposal that makes sense from a staffing perspective, like you said, but also just not being beholden to vendors that can raise rates or not show or drop our contracts at pretty much any given time and geographically make no sense. So I hope we can find a way to make this work. I do think that we'll end up seeing savings that you're not able to articulate right now, either from a student experience perspective and or reliability and consistency, like Ms. Hanaway mentioned. So fully supportive of this. I hope we can pilot it, maybe even beyond 2 at some point in the next couple of years, and perhaps start to think about how do we create a capital investment for fleet that is more robust even. So well done.
Thanks, Liz. You bring up actually some of the greatest challenges we had this past year and even into this year. They drop us. They no longer provide. They don't have the staff. The para's not available. All of the above. And so you're right. Even, I'm hopeful. Obviously, anytime that you bring in a proposal like this, that we're going to find the savings that we hope, because really it wasn't the student experience that brought us here. I wish that it was, but it really wasn't. It was about just looking at the numbers. We have about $900,000 in out of district transportation. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. And I don't know that we can solve for all of it in the next couple of years, but I think we can solve for some. And that's what I'm hopeful to be able to achieve. It may require a little bit of ebb and flow in terms of which transportation vehicles go where and pick up which children. But I do think that we could make it work. And I do think that at the other side of it, Liz, that you mentioned, is that the student experience will be better because whenever it's home and it's our folks, it's better.
Thank you. Jen?
Yeah, I want to echo what both Liz's said. Have you, Dr. De Silva or Dr. Hanaway, have you identified which routes might be possible? I mean, you have an idea of
Yes.
You've had to have some because if you've identified some savings.
Yes. So we looked at a couple of different things. So Dawn provided us with a list of all of the students that are being transported out of district that receive special services. We looked at those runs. We looked at the cost of those runs. We also looked at whether any of those runs the services could be shared with another district. So there are other districts that are, for example, going to the same school. And so do we have an opportunity to perhaps share services with this run, with this district? So therefore, we're going to take this run. We have 2 very expensive runs, 2 or 3 actually. They're in that $120,000 mark. Except the challenge with that is it can't be right. One transportation vehicle, if those children are going to school at approximately the same time, won't work, especially if they're going in 2 different directions. So that's why ultimately, when I wrote this memo, quite frankly, I was looking at 1. By the time I was done writing the memo over the course of 2 days, I was near 2. And because for that reason, Ken, I didn't feel like we were going to get enough with the 1 that it would make it worthwhile. So I didn't want to put us in a position that 30 weeks to hold on for a modified transportation, actually even a regular transportation vehicle, that we wouldn't be in the position to move this forward. So yes, we do have the runs in mind. Again, I think it may ebb and flow. We also looked at the duration of the runs. In other words, if we have a student who is in 8th grade, for example, going to a particular place, there's always the possibility that child will be there for at least 4 more years, right? Of course, it's always our goal to welcome children back home. But if that's not possible, we know that we have the potential of 4 years in that particular, with that particular run, therefore taking on that cost. And just remember, as Liz mentioned, Liz Flogel, is that there's increases each year. So it's not like, okay, you're paying 120. Well, next year we're going to pay 124.
Well, and the increases surpass cost of living, surpass inflation. They are just really extensive.
Sure. And that makes sense. And so as we move this forward, we could have more concrete numbers rather than sort of this aspirational.
Yes, I mean, without identifying students, we basically have that now, right? We know that here's the list of our runs. Here are the 3, if we had 2 transportation vehicles that could work, right? Because if it just depends. Sometimes it depends on timing, right? If I'm dropping off this student who's in early school to a late school and making it back in time, so we certainly have that in mind. And I think we're cautious because remember, this is a small population of kids. They go to very specific places, but yes, we absolutely have that. I think what, Ken, what's lingering out there in terms of costs or cost savings is when you're looking at that run, how many hours do you have in the day that you can use that same individual perhaps in another role, right? So if there's an individual that I'm paying, let's just use $25,000 and they're here in the morning and in the afternoon. And I normally, let's just say, pay for a supervisory para of $10,000. How much is the savings that I'm gaining from that differential? That's what we haven't sorted through yet. But after tonight, it's, if the board has the appetite for me to move forward, I'll be working with Joe and we'll move forward on seeing if we can allocate those vehicles, because if we don't move soon, the likelihood of us having them for September is unlikely.
Right. But I think without compromising, the privacy of our students, I think we can say we have, these 40 runs and this one is 120, this one's 100, this one's 80, 40. We're going to eliminate all of these 40,000 runs or, whatever.
Yes, we do have that. So there are 2.
Have that discussion without compromising the privacy.
There are 2 to 3 runs, Ken, that are over, around $120,000. So we have 2 that are 120. I think 1 that may be slightly less. So we know that, with the hours of those schools that we certainly have 2 in mind, right? So if you then start looking at some of the cost drivers that I've outlined in the memo, the cost of the driver, the adult supervision, if they still need it, maintenance, fuel, getting the folks licensed, okay, how much is remaining? Again, with the cost of the buses aside and not looking at the operating budget, we'd probably be saving about $60,000 for each of those runs. So 120 total. You'll see that savings outlined in the budget this year when I present in January, far more detailed. So I think it'll be a good opportunity to ask that question once we nail down all those details. But approximately, I think that that's a fair assumption.
Well, I imagine you've thought of this already, but we might have more of a savings by eliminating 4 individual $70,000 runs than $120,000.
Yeah. So the way that our runs look right now, again, they can change, and no one knows that better than Dr. Hanaway. But as of right now, it seems like it makes the most sense to take on these 2 big ones. So there's a lot of other ones that are perhaps smaller, like you suggested, but as of right now, it looks like this would make the most sense. But if we only had 1 transportation vehicle, we may have to look at it a little bit differently.
I mean, and those less expensive runs are ones that are higher likelihood that we on and off do ride shares with other districts. So I don't want to ruin a cost savings. Like, I want to maximize all opportunities for cost savings.
Absolutely.
So we're also a factor we're also looking at, aside from what Susie mentioned, is what are the runs that are least likely to give us opportunity for ride shares as well.
And I think where I'm going is this information, I would like to see this information.
Yes.
Just so that we can, as a board, look at the same things you're looking at and follow along the logic of the decision.
So Ken, you will see that. I mean, not in that same kind of way, I think, that perhaps you're asking, but I'm glad to bring it back to the board at any time. But you're going to see the cost savings in the budget, because that's ultimately how we got here.
Right. Well, I would like to see the detail behind that. I mean,
yeah,
I don't want to see it. I'd like to see more than just a $50,000 projection.
Understood.
And the other question, I know you had mentioned it about some districts are having custodians drive and that type of thing. I mean, having had the pleasure of going through the contract renegotiations, have we considered how that might play into those contracts?
No, we haven't. So that's how some districts have done it, not necessarily how our district will do it, but that was where they're part of their bargaining unit, right? Sure. Their driver ends up in part of their bargaining unit. Okay. So that is something that we're going to be considering, but it gives us a frame of reference in terms of where to begin. In terms of who's going to be the driver and what that might look like, and what does the rest of the work look like for that individual during the day. Okay. So even they may not be doing custodian work per se, they may fall right.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Other board member questions? Gina?
Just a comment. I agree with Ken's questions. It will may help us understand how this looks, but I also agree with what Liz said. And it's also, yes, it's a cost saving, but I also personally know families who do take advantage and how they struggled with the vendor not being reliable, drivers not turning up, parents struggling in the morning. So I'm glad we're looking into it. I'm glad we're building capacity. And eventually, if this leads to a saving, it is thinking outside the box, if you will. We have a new team here. We're looking at innovative, different, how we budget ourselves, how we look at stuff, how we address our special needs population. So I do applaud, and I do understand the need for this. And hopefully once we see the numbers, we can all understand the savings as they're shown. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Anyone else? Thank you, Dr. De Silva and Dr. Hanaway, for that.
You're welcome.
Moving on to the next item, approval of high school course proposals. There are actually 2 motions underneath this. We'll start with the first one around the courses themselves.
So a real quick point of information. Ken? Do we need, is there anything formal we need to do for Dr. De Silva to move forward working on this proposal? Just sort of our general acquiescence is fine.
There's not a motion on the table for that. Dr. De Silva is,
so no, because it's part of the state contract, it's within our purview to move forward with the buses. If I felt tonight that the Board of Education was not in agreement that this is a direction, or if you wanted further information, then I'd be glad to do that without a doubt. But given the fact that it's in the state contract, it's actually under $50,000 too, which helps. I'll soon, between now and tomorrow morning, I'll work with Joe in moving forward, because 30 weeks is a long time.
Exactly.
So time is of the essence here.
Yeah.
Dr. De Silva, if you felt that the majority of the board was against this, you'd certainly hold back, correct? But
I would absolutely, yes. If the Board of Education, that was the purpose of tonight. If the Board of Education felt that they either needed more information or they didn't have appetite to move forward. I don't know that there's been any history in Ridgefield in trying to use their own vehicles to transport high-end cost students, but it seems like there wasn't any history of that. So I felt that if I came to you and you all said, not something we're up to doing, not right now, then we wouldn't move forward. Again, it came out, I wish I could have said that it came out of something different, but it really came out of the budget in that process. So that's how we landed here.
Thank you.
I didn't hear that tonight. So if I don't, then I'm going to move forward and look to get those 2 vehicles.
Okay, now on to item E, approval of high school course proposals. There are 2 motions. First one around the courses themselves. Do I have a motion?
I move that the Board of Education approve new high school courses, Electrical Engineering 1, Electrical Engineering 2, and a state required offering, African American, Black, and Puerto Rican Latino Studies, as presented on November 22nd, 2021.
Thank you, Rochelle. Do I have a second?
Second.
Ken seconds. All those in favor, please raise your hands. That is everyone. Thank you. That's unanimous. That motion carries. And now the second motion around the textbooks.
I move that the Board of Education approve high school textbooks for AP Human Geography and AP US Government and Politics as presented on November 22nd, 2021.
Thank you, Rachel. Do I have a second for that motion?
Second.
Ken again. Okay, all those in favor of approving, please raise your hands. It's unanimous. Thank you very much. Both motions carry. Next up, the approval of the 5-year capital plan. Do I have a motion?
I move that the Board of Education approve the 5-year capital plan as presented on November 22nd, 2021.
Thank you, Rachel. Do I have a second? Tina? All those in favor, please raise your hands. That is unanimous as well. That motion carries. Thank you. And we can move on to policies, starting with policy 5125.1. Do I have a motion?
I move that the Board of Education approve a new policy 5125.1, student privacy.
Do I have a second? Ken, thank you. All those in favor of approving, please raise your hands. Seven, 4. Anybody, all those against? All those abstaining? 7-4, 1 abstain. Thank you. The motion carries. And moving on to the next one, policy 6172.3, homeschooling. Do I have a motion?
I move that the Board of Education approve policy 6172.3, homeschooling.
Thank you, Rachel. Do I have a second? Ken seconds. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Seven. Okay. Any against? 7-4, 1 against. Okay, the motion carries. Thank you. And policy number 9325. Do I have a motion?
I move that the Board of Education approve policy 9325, meeting conduct.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Ken seconds. All those in favor of approving bylaw 9325, please raise your hands. Seven. All those against, please raise your hands. 1. Motion carries 7-1. Thank you. And we can move on to correspondence to the board, starting with public comment.
Okay. So good evening. Just as a kind reminder, please state your name and address, and you will have 3 minutes for public comment. First public comment is Beth.
Hi, I don't have a public comment. Thank you.
Okay. We did receive one letter for public comment this evening from Deborah Franceschini, 72 Spire View Road. Last year, I wrote to you about the need for programming to our RHS seniors on college rape awareness. This issue continues to be a rising problem at universities around the country. See article below. Unfortunately, nothing was done to bring awareness to this issue by RPS. I'm writing to ask again that the below programming be provided to all RHS seniors this year and the years to follow. This programming can be done virtually or via an assembly. I understand that this is an uncomfortable conversation, but one that needs to be had. I ask you to please reconsider this request again. The article attached was from the CT Mirror. It was dated December 4th, 2021, and it was entitled "A Double Red Zone, Alarms Raised at Many Universities Over Sexual Assault Reports." So now moving on to our correspondence report, we have received 8 emails since our last Board of Education meeting. 2 emails were in regards to the mobile vaccine unit. 1 email was regarding sexual assault on college campuses. 1 email regarded the mental health of our children. 1 email regarded public comment. 2 emails regarded the COVID-19 screening program, and 1 email regarded social distancing. And that is it for this evening.
Thank you, Rachel. We've come to the end of our agenda for the night. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I so move.
Ken moves. Do I have a second? Rachel seconds. All those in favor of adjourning, please raise your hands. Eight. All those again. Liz, with your hand raised? Yes, okay. We are adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a happy and healthy holiday with your family, and we will see you all in January. Thank you.
Thank you all. Be safe.